I did quite enjoy the boat thing, but I've got to say, I did notice a few of the countries got like really tiny boats. I'm not saying anybody did this on purpose. I'm just saying that I noticed some countries had tiny boats.
Some countries got the little boats, yeah.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of 80% Mental. This is the episode where we review the Olympics, and we've done this 2 or 3 times, Leah, now? Is this the third one?
Yeah, I think this is the third.
This is the third one, yeah. So we've done this 3 times. We always have a review of the Olympics, our favorite bits, memorable moments, and our usual guest, Chelsea, who's reviewed the Olympics with us before, is just too big time for us now.
She thinks she's so cool.
I know. She's too big time. Her employer won't allow her to do podcasts anymore because she's so big time. So she's not joining us. But I am absolutely thrilled to announce that we have Dr. Quincy Davis with us, who is going to help us review the Olympics. So, Dr. Quincy Davis, welcome to 80% Mental.
I appreciate it. I'm very glad to be here. 1, I'm happy because this is a special episode and I got invited. And 2, that Chelsea just dropped the ball and allowed me to be here, even though she's usually here. So picking up the slack where I can.
Well, we know who to call upon next time. Chelsea, you're out. You're done.
Yeah, call me up. I can go 6 man of the year. I can do whatever you need me to do. So.
Just by way of introduction for people who don't know, Dr. Quincy Davis serves as an assistant director of counseling and sports psychology at Mississippi State University and owns a private practice, Resolute Performance Consulting. Quincy's passionate about all things athlete mental health, mental performance, and overall well-being. And I dare say we'll draw on some of that experience when we talk about what's gone on in the last 2 weeks in Paris. So, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Excited. I listen to the podcast all the time, so being a guest on here is not associated with ASP is exciting.
Yeah, because Quincy's actually been on the podcast before, a very short segment. I did a review. I did a kind of live at ASP where I went and spoke to loads of the loads of the delegates at the conference, just about their research. And I bumped into Quincy. We talked a little bit about his research and kind of kept in touch ever since. So
that was actually our first introduction. So
I think it was, yeah. So we're going to start this episode. People who are familiar with our Olympic reviews will know that Leah is obsessed with the Olympics.
I was assigned Olympics at birth, I think.
Yeah. So we're going to start with a little bit of Olympics trivia.
I get so nervous about this. I always feel like I'm going to fail.
I don't think you have, though, ever. So because you know everything about the Olympics. So we've got a few questions for you just to kind of kick us off here, Leah. Okay. Olympic trivia. We should have like a theme tune for the Olympic trivia. I don't know, maybe we can come up with something. Okay, starting off with an easy one. How many times have the Olympics been hosted in Paris?
This is the third one.
This is the third one.
It's actually the 100th anniversary of the last time it was held. It's because it was 1924, and then 1900 was the first time. And it's the second city that it's been held in 3 times, and then LA will be the third city to have it 3 times.
I mean, get bonus points for extra information.
That's impressive. That's impressive.
That's ridiculous.
London was the first to have it 3 times.
Okay, here's a question for you. Again, you might know this one. Which nation was the first to host the summer and winter games in the same year?
Great question. I know Germany's done it, and that was in 1932.
I'll give you a clue. It was before that.
It was before that.
Yeah.
Was it France?
It was France.
Wow.
It was France. It was in 1924. 4 national Olympic committees won their first ever gold medals in Paris. You get a point for each of them.
First ever gold medals.
Yeah, for 4 different countries.
St. Lucia?
Yes. Quincy's like, oh my God, who is this person?
Can you write me a book?
Who else won first gold medal? Guatemala.
Yes.
They won in shooting.
I did not think you were going to get that one.
Yeah, she won in shooting.
Mm-hmm.
St. Lucia won the 100 meter sprint. Who else won a very first gold medal? Pakistan?
No. Shall I give you the sports?
Yeah.
So one of them was a women's triple jump. and the other was the men's 200 meters.
Oh shoot! I could see his face.
Quincy, any ideas?
Don't call on me.
Okay.
I'm not a lifeline. Can't help you out here.
I don't remember the triple jump one, although I have thoughts about the triple jump. We're going to get to that.
I mean, this is dead air now, so.
I know. It's is it another small island nation? The 200 meter?
No, not really.
Okay. I can't think of it.
Okay, so Botswana was the men's 200 meters, and the women's triple jump was Thea Lafond from Dominica.
Oh, nice.
So there we go. Yeah. Okay, we'll do a couple more because this is kind of painful. I don't want to drag it out. Okay, this isn't a question. This is an Olympic fact that you might be interested in. So swimmers competing in some of the longer events. So back in 1896, do you know how they did the long distance swimming events?
No, I don't.
So they took people out to sea. That distance, and then it was just they left them there. And it was first one back to shore. Yeah,
incredible.
Which I'm voting. I vote that they bring that back.
Bring that back immediately.
That's crazy, but it almost like replicates like a marathon. I don't know if you ever ran a marathon before.
God, no.
But you get on the bus at the starting line. I ran one last summer, so I know this. And you get on the bus and you just take a trip at 26.2 miles, and the whole time I'm like, wow, this is a long trip, not realizing that like you're just going 26 miles out to run back to the starting line.
This is real
so we finally get there, and I'm like, oh yeah, that was our distance. Okay, this is going to be a day. So that's exactly what that reminds me of. Like, just imagine being on this boat and you just going out to sea. And you're like, we're getting further away from that island.
With the added threat of drowning.
Right, yeah.
Well, yeah, I vote we bring that back anyway. All right, last one then. Youngest athlete to complete at the games. Who was the youngest?
Who competed in the games?
Yeah.
Was it Quincy?
Wasn't it? We're not talking about Quincy, our guest here, by the way. We're talking about Quincy Wilson, right?
Right.
Yeah.
He's 16. Was there some 14-year-old?
Yeah, so Quincy Wilson was 16, yeah, won the gold in the 4x400. To be fair, though, they could have put like a bag of crisps running one of the legs and still would have 100%. Won.
But I thought it was nice that they put him in there.
Yeah.
Like, that was a nice little shout out.
Yeah, for sure.
But there was a younger athlete, yeah.
It's skateboarder?
Skateboarder.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember her name.
11-year-old skateboarder, Zheng Haohao from China.
Yeah.
Imagine that. Imagine being 11.
11.
That's crazy.
That's too young.
Oh, I was playing video games.
I think middle schoolers should not be.
Yeah.
Just graduated from 5th grade.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there we go. A few facts about the Olympics that you may not have known before. Leah, as ever, coming through as Olympics trivia champion. We'll get a theme tune for the next one.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, I don't really know where this episode is going to go. We've got a few things that we want to talk about. We might talk about the ceremonies, some of the incredible achievements, memorable moments. We'll definitely talk about the breakdancing, because how can we not talk about the breakdancing?
Oh, Jesus Lord.
Yeah, and we'll probably talk about some actual psychology stuff as well, because that's what we're about. But we'll try and keep it under 2 hours. But stay with us.
I mean, do we want to start like with the opening ceremonies and with the city itself?
I think we should, yeah. Let's start with the opening. So I was saying just before we came on, I didn't actually see the opening ceremony as it happened, and I caught up on it last night just so we could talk about it today. But go on then, Leah. What was your take on the opening ceremony this time?
My take on the opening ceremony, I genuinely thought that the boat thing was very cool. Like, I'm all for Parade of Nations, and I'm glad they got it in the closing ceremonies. But I thought the boat thing was really, really cool. I thought that they used the city itself throughout the whole Olympic Games. I thought they used the city really, really well. Just highlighting the like massive landmarks and like the scenery. And I thought it was so beautiful. I thought that it was maybe the opening ceremonies were maybe the most French thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh man, there's going to be some American people getting real upset about this, but it is from France, and people are not going to keep that in mind.
I like the interracial gender fluid throuple in the library as well.
Truly one of the best moments. Truly one of the best moments. I was watching this and I was like, oh gosh, this is great.
Yeah.
People are going to get so mad about this.
Oh yeah, social media right away.
They're like, what is this horror show of nonsense?
Yeah.
I liked it.
I thought it was great.
It was very wet as well, wasn't it? It was a very wet opening ceremony.
I actually felt really bad for the can-can dancers, the Moulin Rouge dancers, because their platform was like so small. I was like, those ladies are gonna slide right off into the river. I was really genuinely nervous for them.
Yeah, the bit on the bridge where they had like the catwalk on the bridge. I don't know if you saw that, Quincy. Mm-hmm. I when I flicked on, I genuinely thought it was like a special effect. I didn't realize it was actually raining that hard.
Yeah. No, I thought the same thing.
Well, I just felt really bad for them. And
I thought the metal band was like sick as hell. I thought that was awesome.
I fast forwarded through that bit. I'm sorry.
It was actually really cool. I was like,
that's one part I did not see. I did not.
No. You didn't miss anything. One thing I thought was interesting, though, you said obviously it was the first time that they'd done a ceremony outside of the actual stadium, outside the Olympic Stadium, and I did quite enjoy the boat thing. But I've got to say, I did notice that a few of the countries got like really tiny boats.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up.
It was quite choppy as well, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you noticed this, Quincy, but like Gabon, Haiti, Ghana, like real tiny little boats. And I'm like, I'm not saying anybody did this on purpose. I'm just saying that I noticed.
Some countries.
Yeah, some countries had tiny boats.
Some countries got the little boats, yeah. I did notice that. It's like a little tugboat. And I was just like, and then you get to the next country and they're riding nice, no bumps, not having to hold on to anybody.
Yeah.
I'm just like, all right, like somebody got snubbed here.
Yeah, who made those decisions? Like I say, I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying.
It was noticed.
It was noticed, yeah. But I like the bit where who was on the boat? There's Serena, Carl Lewis. Who else was on the boat?
Was Rafael Nadal on that boat?
Right, yeah, Nadal.
So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Serena did not look happy on that.
She's like, my hair is getting wet.
Yeah, right.
They kept her on that boat too long.
Not okay.
Carl Lewis didn't seem to have any idea what he was doing either. Like, why am I on a boat? What am I doing here?
Yeah, right. Smiling away.
What's happening next? But yeah, I enjoyed it. I did enjoy the opening.
Celine Dion, also incredible.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Don't act like you saw it.
No, I to be honest, I was a little bit over it by that point. It was like 8 hours long or something.
They always are. I don't know why anybody is surprised by this.
But no, I did enjoy it. I thought it was a nice start to the Olympics. Except a lot of the athletes, I think that the boats weren't that well attended. I think the idea of spending 4 or 5 hours on a choppy boat wasn't that appealing to quite a lot of the athletes. So a few of them were fairly sparse.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true though. Also, when they're in the stadium, like if you're competing the next morning, like you're not going to that thing.
Yeah, seasickness is less of an issue though.
That's true. That's fair.
True, very true.
Okay, let's talk about some of the highlights then, some of the big stories from the Olympics. And oh, good Lord, should we start with the breakdancing? I feel like we should get that out of the way.
Okay.
Quincy, are you aware of the breakdancing?
I didn't necessarily watch. I knew of the breakdancing. I didn't watch it, but I saw a lot of social media's take on the breakdancing.
I mean, good grief. So for those of you who weren't aware, and God knows how you're not aware of the breakdancing at the Olympics, the breakdancing was one of the new sports for Paris, and it was dominated by a 36-year-old white lady from Australia.
I mean, I think dominated is a little bit. Well, no,
I dominated as in coverage, not dominated as. I mean, she scored 0 points.
Right.
She did score, rightfully so, 0 points.
And you might be wondering why her, how she's racialized and her age might be relevant here. We're going to get to that. But Rachel Gunn, 36-year-old Rachel Gunn, also known as Ray Gunn, which is the worst street name I have. Come on.
But I mean, given
better.
her name is Rachel Gunn, like I feel like that's a pretty decent, like you have limited choices.
Yeah, you don't have you didn't have to search for that name. Like it just kind of, came to you.
That is true. It does kind of jump out at you. But anyway, I was kind of so the story is her routine was abysmal. It was weird, and I was kind of initially I was torn between saying, she's having a go. It represents the Olympic spirit, and she's having a go. She's going out there. She's doing it. Good for you. But also, there was kind of a bit of a what the fuck are you doing?
Well, my larger question is because she did qualify for the Olympics somehow. So that's the process that I want to interrogate. Like not the fact that she was there, but like that was allowed to happen.
Well, what was the pool of people? What's the number of people that,
But there are some stories around how she qualified and the fact that her husband is also the coach. I don't really want to get into that because I don't know how much of that is true and how much of it is rumors. But the bottom line is that this 36-year-old white lady who has got a PhD in cultural studies and a bachelor's in contemporary music. She's a researcher, basically. She's interested in the cultural politics of breaking, which, again, issues we'll get to. But the bottom line is that she ended up representing Australia at the Olympics. I mean, I don't know. The fact that she studies this stuff, she's got a PhD in this stuff. Already we've got the academicization, that's not a word, of like a culture that's not her own, right? So breaking originated in the 60s and the 70s in New York, in the Bronx. Predominantly this culture developed and created by working class African American and Latino and Caribbean young people, right? And it's cultural appropriation.
Right. Well, I really think, to me, watching it, the larger issue was taking a cultural phenomenon and turning it into a competitive structure, right? Like I kind of felt like if they had taken like indigenous dance and made it into an Olympic sport, we would be having the same conversation. Do you know what I mean? And because breaking is so also interconnected with like the music and musical genres, and because of like copyright infringement, like you couldn't use, like you had to use like generic music, like with a generic DJ, like that kind of also removed some of the gravitas that this event could have really had. And I think in addition to having someone who is like so like about as far removed from like the cultural like origins of breaking as possible. And I was actually like, the thing that really sucks is like the people who performed really well, like we're not talking about any of them.
Exactly.
Like, the people who won, the people with like the Canadian guy who won, like all these incredible performers, like don't know anything about any of them unless you had to go look for it. But all the shit that was online that was like, who the fuck is this woman? Like that was the entire conversation. And we didn't get to talk about like how great these breakers are.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. Because I only saw, like, I didn't even know it was something that was happening, right? And then I get on social media and I see this old white woman breakdancing, and I'm like, okay, this can't be like, it's bad enough that she can say like I competed in the Olympics, right? But then how much of it is a slap in the face for everybody this is actually their craft. This is something that that they practice and have been doing ever since they were young. Like it was almost like she was on TikTok one day scrolling, was like, hey, I want to do that. Let me see if I can, like I studied this stuff. Let me see if I can do it. So I just thought it was interesting that was what got the attention, like Leah was just saying, of this new sport. And then I saw like 2 days later that breaking's not going to be in the next Olympics, which I thought was also interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
because you're going to LA.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's a couple of things in there, there's like, like Leah was saying, she's centered herself, right? She's supposed to be, promoting and celebrating this culture, right? But she's sort of centered herself as this middle-class white lady. And somehow has become the spokesperson for an entire culture that isn't hers. And
right.
I guess what's worse is that she will benefit massively from this, not only in terms of her own research. I said to Leah last night, 100% guaranteed there's going to be like an autoethnographic piece of research comes out in the next 6 months, 100%. But, she's going to make a load of money from endorsements, from, the talk show circuit. She'll have like articles written about it. And she's just kind of benefited hugely from this appropriating this culture. And I think like what's potentially not worse, but another layer to this is like one of the things that she said was, I was never going to beat these girls on what they do best, the dynamic and the power moves. So I wanted to move differently, be artistic and creative. And I'm like, are you trying to tell me that they're not artistic and creative? That there's no artistry and creativity in breakdancing, and you, as the cultured white person, are bringing this to the sport? It's ridiculous, and it plays into those tropes that I've talked about so many times about the capabilities of athletes of color being powerful and strong, and so on, and the capabilities of athletes racialized as white, and it just plays into those tropes, and it's so frustrating. But one of the funniest quotes that I read about this was from Maddock Neha on Twitter. She said, "What the world needs to understand is that Ray Gun represents a very specific and uniquely Australian white woman in academia, one who is so intent on decolonizing that she's done a full loop back round to colonizing again."
Horseshoe theory in real time.
Right. But I think, for anybody who's wondering like why people are so, not upset, but why people are kind of understandably annoyed at her, these are some of the reasons as to why I think that is.
I think my favorite take on it was somebody was like, this woman has achieved something that no other academic person has ever achieved, and that people are reading her dissertation.
Fair play.
Which I laughed about for about 5 minutes.
That's funny.
Cool. All right. What else then? What else are some of the big stories?
Oh gosh. So I thought that this Olympics was so joyful that I was really struck by so many athletes who just seem to be having the best fucking time. Like the last time we had the Olympics, it was like super COVID lockdown, and it just seemed to have this like stress and strain around it. And everybody just seemed to like genuinely was so happy for every other athlete. Like these athletes were cheering on each other, even from rival countries. And I particularly noticed this with diving, in that, diving is typically dominated by China. They're unbelievable divers, but they're also very stoic, and they really tend to keep to themselves. And this was the first time that I really saw like them interacting with divers from other countries and other competitors. And I was like, this is so great. Like, I felt so happy for these athletes to have this like incredibly joyful experience.
What do you think was behind that then? Because I noticed that as well. We talked about it in the Winter Olympics review about that culture around like some of the winter sports, skateboarding, snowboarding, that sort of mutual support. But I noticed that in these Olympics as well. It was kind of across the whole sport. What do you think is driving that?
I mean, I do think part of it is just like having fans.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that was like having their families there. I think that was probably pretty big. But I'm actually not entirely sure. I feel like that there are a lot of athletes who are just kind of like done with just the like keeping to ourselves. Like this is serious times, and we have to like everybody takes their sport seriously, but I feel like they're taking themselves less seriously. but I'm not entirely sure what's underpinning that.
Yeah, I think there's something to that, definitely. The kind of shifting conversation around success and winning and like what success really is for athletes. I think maybe that has something to do with it.
And maybe it's just like we've talked about like mental health in the Olympics every single time we do this episode, but there were several times where 3 very prominent athletes that I can remember that I made note of, like specifically talked about their therapists, right? Like obviously Simone Biles, like she's talked a lot about, she's like, I had my therapy appointment this morning, like right before the events, but like Noah Lyles talked about having multiple therapists, like a mental health therapist. He said he had a grief counselor. He also has a sports mental skills person. And then Anna Cockrell, another track and field athlete, when someone was asking, what would you say to yourself looking back from the last Olympics? And her quote is really great. She says, I'll start with the easy one. In 2021, what would I tell myself? Girl, get in that therapist's office immediately.
Yeah.
Let's get this together. She said, on a serious note, though, I think I was kind of a person who was inconsistent as far as I would go to therapy for a second and then be like, I'm cured. And that's not how things work. The progress, in my opinion, comes from continuing when you're not in crisis anymore. So I think the biggest difference from 2021 to now was just a real overall commitment to the work in every aspect of my life, on the track course, in the weight room, as far as my diet goes, but also just committing to the work on myself on and off the track. How do I become a better person? How do I become a person that's better equipped to handle the emotional highs and lows of training and competing? And like, that's like that's everything. Like that's anything you would just ever want or an athlete to take away from like the process. Right. And I think maybe some of these athletes, not just they're walking the walk, you know what I mean? And they're being vocal about it in a way that they have never been before.
Is that something you found in your work, Quincy? Like athletes being more open to talking about mental health and talking about, seeing a therapist, using a psychologist in their performance and well-being? Is that something that you see a little bit of?
Yeah, you're definitely seeing a lot more now. And I think it helps, especially when athletes are watching the Olympics or they're watching other professional athletes talk about seeing a mental performance coach or a mental health therapist or something along those lines, where they now feel comfortable enough to say like, hey, like I can go and talk about these issues or these concerns that I have without having to feel like any less of an athlete or any less of a person in this world, because again, like there's still that large stigma that surrounds it. And they don't want to have their story get out or, maybe lose some type of deal or something that they might have going on for themselves outside of sport. And so you definitely see that a lot more now. It's like these athletes who are big time, showcasing their talents, and now they're talking about it, and our athletes are feeling like, okay, I'm feeling a lot more comfortable. And I feel like I've seen a lot of growth just within 1 year. Of athletes who are more comfortable being able to get the support that they need for their overall well-being.
Yeah.
I think it's also notable that these are athletes these aren't people who necessarily, and I don't know Anna's full story. I don't presume to know it, but I think that a lot of athletes are talking about mental health and mental wellness separate and apart from recovering from trauma. That like, like when you talk about like Simone Biles and Allie Raceman and all of the gymnasts and like they had deeply serious traumatic responses that anybody would understand that of course you're going to be in therapy. Like that you wouldn't question that, right? But for Anna to sit there and be like, I just want to be a better person. I want to be able to emotionally regulate. I want to do all of these things that therapy can also be used for, that you don't need to have like this horrific event to happen to you to make use of these services.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I think that the discussion around mental health, and again, just the openness of athletes has been like really refreshing. And like the more I see and hear and read about Noah Lyles, the more I love him just a little bit more every time.
So great.
Just brilliant. Absolutely love that guy.
But I think that kind of leads to that conversation that you were talking about earlier, Pete, in terms of like why was the energy so good, and like I feel like a lot of times social media tries to pit athletes against one another, and they weren't allowing that to happen, right? Especially like when the Olympics, wrapped up, Noah Lyles, they tried to say that he didn't attend the Adidas party for Anthony Edwards because he thought he didn't deserve a shoe, and Noah thought he deserved a shoe. And Noah's like, that's not the case at all. Like
That's
trying
not
to
even
pit these
remotely.
athletes against, you know what I'm saying? Like trying to pit these athletes against one another. And I think the athletes are just like, to hell with you. Like we're not allowing you to, speak for us or, do anything that you can to try to, talk about maybe what we want or how we feel or how we act. Like they're just fed up with it. So I think that also has a lot to do with it in terms of like why the energy was so high, because they're pretty much shutting out the media and allowing themselves to just go out there and compete, perform, and have fun with it at the end of the day, which I think is the biggest thing.
Yeah. So that they're kind of rooting for each other is like really genuine,
exactly.
right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So we've got to talk about Yusuf Dikeç, the Turkish shooter.
Yep.
First
rolled
ever,
out of bed.
Yeah.
Most casual silver medal you ever saw.
Did you see this, Quincy? The guy just literally I don't even think he was staying at the Olympics. I think he just kind of like got the bus in every morning.
Another person who was the meme, right? The guy that's just like just
the Olympic
I didn't
memes
see the
have
actual
been
performance.
Awesome.
I didn't see the actual performance, but I've been crying at the memes. Like they put Steph Curry's face on him. Like it's just like
it's absolutely amazing.
Literally rolled out of bed, put on the first thing he could find, jeans off his bedroom floor.
It's a good thing this T-shirt says Turkey on it.
Yeah. Just casual. I just thought it was brilliant. But yeah, the Olympic memes have absolutely killed me.
I mean, I really have to say, like, just the content creation from the Olympics village, elite level, like top tier, incredible.
Well, they did like they gave on all the medal ceremonies, they gave the athletes a mobile phone to take a selfie with, right? Every single medal ceremony. So I thought it was like quite a nice touch. And again, it's kind of bringing those athletes together in a way that maybe we haven't seen before.
Right.
But the other kind of big story that I wanted to touch on a little bit was obviously Imani Khalif. And I was thinking about how to frame this story. And really, basically, a woman won some women's boxing, and that's it. That's really the story.
Yeah, can you believe a woman entered a boxing match and got punched in the face?
I mean, I know. It's crazy. But, a woman won the women's boxing. That's it. That's the story. There's nothing else to talk about there. But there is something in there about performing at an elite level when you're just dealing with absolutely horrendous media attacks, like deeply personal stuff as well, right? All the time. People getting up in your business the whole time you're trying to compete. And she competed, beautifully and ended up winning. And I just wonder,
gold medal ever, like, right, suck it, like from
so from a psychology point of view, like how do we do that? How does somebody deal with like really horrific personal attacks and still compete at the Olympics at a high level?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much she was on social media. Like if I were her, I would have just like burned my phone.
Right.
And I know that a lot of Olympians, like to varying degrees, will be on or off socials. Like some, like Alona Mar from rugby, like she does a lot of content creation even during the Olympics, and some just shut it down. And I really hope she was one that shut it down.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
Yeah. And even if it was something that she might have been seeing or, might have saw for a little while, I'm sure she was kind of riding that adrenaline of being at the Olympics and is probably dealing with a lot of it right now, coming down from that high of like that, just that adrenaline rush of being there, winning, performing, I think that right now would be the time where I'd really be latching on, because that honeymoon phase is kind of wearing off a little bit maybe. And she's probably seen a lot more, hearing a lot more about it now. And so I would think that she's much more impacted now than she was while they're competing.
I mean, I think the one, I don't know if this is a good thing or what, but like obviously, like, she's getting all of this heat from people who had nothing to do with anything. And, the fact of the matter is that the IOC came out and they were like, she's a woman, she's competing in women's events, the end of story. Like, and I think if the IOC had not done that, because, she comes from a country that has really significant laws restricting the lives of LGBTQIA people. And it is literally illegal to be a trans person in that country. It is literally illegal to be any variation of not straight in that country. And these attacks could literally put her life in danger. And I think having the IOC make that statement probably could save her life.
Yeah.
And I mean that in a very real sense.
No, absolutely. And you're right. It's people who have absolutely zero to do with anything who are chirping in here like our
Joanne. I think it was really so fascinating. First of all, she can go fuck herself to the moon. Like, I hope that Imani can sue them to oblivion, and I hope she goes and buys herself a whole ass island and just lives on it for the rest of her life. That's what she deserves. Like, the thing with J.K. Rowling that really stuns me is, like, you are beyond wealthy. Go be wealthy by yourself. Like, what are you doing here? Like, you know what I mean? Like, why are you in this conversation? And I do think it was really telling that, like, halfway through the Olympics, like, she sort of shut it down and, like, stopped making any statements anywhere. And I was like, yeah, I bet somebody was like, hey, girl, maybe you should shut the fuck up because you're going to get in trouble. Like, I'm not a lawyer, but I feel like maybe a lawyer probably said something to her. It was like, this might not be your best move.
And I feel like there is a racial element as well, in 100%. That I don't know why we can't just let women of color be good at stuff.
And to be fair, like, I don't want to take away from the women of color component of it, but it's not like Katie Ledecky doesn't get these same arguments.
Sure. And Ilona Mayer, who you just mentioned Ilona
Mayer,
as well.
for sure, gets a lot of this. Yeah. But there is a very particular brand of misogynoir that happens, with women of color. But I do think that one of the things that I started to realize that was made very, very clear in this Olympics is that women and men are not viewed in parallel in terms of athletic performance. That women and men are viewed as a spectrum. And that on one end, you have woman, like the most feminine, whatever. And then as you go along the scale of performance, at some point, you start to tip over into man. And then man takes over and there's no ceiling, right? That there's a level of ability that once a woman achieves it, her femininity gets questioned, her womanhood gets questioned, and you have to prove your womanhood. There's no point on the end of the spectrum for man that says, like, is this alien status now? Like, there's no, like, superhuman, like, nobody looked at Michael Phelps and was like, dolphin? Question mark? Do you know what I mean? Like, no, you've just achieved great things.
Yeah.
But there's a hard limit for women.
Right.
That they're not viewed in parallel.
An arbitrarily set limit.
Arbitrarily set, and also very dependent on how you perform femininity. Right? Like, do you show up face laid, hair done, nails? Like, there's so much performative femininity that happens in sport, of, like, whether it's restricting your diet, whether it's whatever, like, and I do think, to bring this back to like this idea of women of color, that why there is always such an emphasis on, like, nails and nail art, particularly in track and field, is, like, because it's one of the ways in which, like, you can be overtly feminine is by having these, like, ostentatious, like, manicures. Men, thoughts?
I mean, first of all, hard agree. But I was kind of thinking about Noah Lyle's manicure.
Also, I need a manicure correspondent from this Olympics. between Shikari, between Noah Lyles, between the women's gymnastics team, like also Andrade's eye makeup, and I need like a beauty correspondent.
Well, I mean, why don't you should put yourself forward for that?
Fucking yes. But I also wonder, like, if this was one of the reasons why. I think it was, I want to say Maybelline or CoverGirl. I need to double check that, but who partnered with Ilona Mar, and she always had like a real bold red lip in a lot of her. And then that was not true last year. You know, that having more of a feminized look, I don't know how deliberate that was on her part in having that sponsor, but I can't be surprised at it.
Yeah, I mean, you ran with some great points there. But then I also, as you're saying these things, the first thing that came to my mind is like, okay, well, you didn't really hear these things about like the USA women's national basketball team, right? And you don't hear these things about like Brittany Griner, right? Or like who they don't necessarily feel like they have to present as feminine. And I wonder if that's because of maybe the image that they've already, exhibited of themselves over here, and people are just more accepting of it, or you know what I'm saying? So I feel like within, especially as I was watching women's basketball, like there were games up until that last game where they were dominating, right? And it's not like, oh, well, they have men on their team or they should go and play on the men's side or anything like that. It's just like, oh, that's what we expected, and that's perfectly fine, right?
But I also think it took 8 gold medals to get to that point.
I mean, I'll 100% agree.
Like I
100% agree. Yeah.
Like I think that those women have certainly experienced that. I don't know that they experience it anymore.
Yeah.
To the same degree that other women of color do, maybe. But I also think it is very wrapped up to your point on how successful they are. But like to that end, like women's gymnastics, which is super duper feminine, doesn't necessarily get that same, but they also show up with eyelashes and full faces of makeup. And, I don't know how they compete with those fingernails. I could never compete with like long nails like that. Like the second I got on bars, it'd be like, it's all over.
But then going back to your point, you guys are talking about the Turkish shooter, right? Who got out of bed, just rolled up. Nobody said much about him besides the fact that, hey, he performed well, and they didn't say anything about his appearance. They were just like, he performed well, despite looking like he just got out of bed. And that was the extent of it, right? And you become a meme just based off of that.
This is the 80% Mental Podcast Olympics review special. I'm here with Dr. Leah Washington and Dr. Quincy Davis. We talked about some of the big stories of the Olympics. I'd love to know what you think about some of this stuff. You can get in touch at 80percentmental.com, the website, or you can tweet us at EPM Podcast. You can find us on Instagram at 80percentmental. Get in touch. Let us know what you think. Did you enjoy the Olympics? What were your favorite highlights? I'd love to hear from you. I guess we should probably talk about some of the actual psychology stuff as well, given that's kind of what. Right. So a few things that kind of stuck out for me anyway, and I'll get you guys to comment on them. One of the things that really jumped out were the number of stories of longevity. There were a number of examples of athletes who were at their 3rd, 4th, 5th Olympics, but still performing at a really high level. So, obviously there's Simone Biles, Adam Peaty, the British swimmer, was going for his 3rd gold in a row. Came up slightly short with the silver, but then talked about how he was successful just by being there. And that was his version of success. I really loved hearing that. Tom Daley, Nafi Tiam, 3 times gold medalist in heptathlon.
That is wild.
That's incredible.
What an accomplishment. Oh my gosh.
How do we, thinking about the psychology of this, right? How do you keep coming back for more? And how do you keep coming back for more and keep performing at that high level? What are kind of some of the things that you see, from a psychology perspective? Quincy, I'll start with you.
I mean, I wish I could tell you, because I know myself. Like, I got my gold. All right, I'm good. I'll see you guys.
Right.
But I feel like a lot of them is just that hunger for more, and that competitiveness, that drive. And I feel like once you get that one, then it's easy to fall back on the same training that you were doing from a mental and physical perspective. And so you're like, hey, this is what I did to get to this point. Okay, now it's just a repeated cycle, and it gets to a point where it's like, okay, well, how long can I compete physically, right? How long can my body withstand a bunch of the bumps and the bruises and feeling all beat up? And so I feel like that's the biggest thing when you're looking at it is like once they get a taste of it, I feel like it's easy for them to just kind of, okay, now let's continue this cycle. Let's build upon the strengths that I already have, and continue to perform at a high level. But yeah, I don't know. When I'm hearing some of the ages and how long they've been in the Olympics, I'm just like, sometimes it's hard for me to bend down to pick something up, right? If I don't stretch enough. So I'm like, I don't understand how I'm grunting, I'm doing all these different things. And so I'm
The
like,
old
how do
man
they
noises.
do that? Right. The old man noises. I'm not even old. So it just goes to show like how do they continue to do this when they've been doing it since they were very, very young. Especially. And then as they get the success, a lot of them are having to deal with the media turmoil, right? And the things that come with it and the pressure that's put on them. Will they win another gold? If they don't win another gold, then they sucked at it. They didn't perform to the best of their ability, or there was something else that was wrong with them that they're pulling out of their asses to make up about these athletes. So yeah, I feel like just that taste of success for a lot of these athletes, and then building upon those mental strengths and the physical strengths that they already have is kind of what allows them to prolong their careers as Olympic medalists.
Yeah, I think especially when you look at like the United States basketball teams who've been doing this, who have some of the older athletes, right? And they're just like LeBron James just has a triple double like in the semifinals. You're 40 years old. What are you doing? Like, like what? Again, question mark, alien status, like cyborg. I don't know. Just asking questions. But like, I do also think to that end, I think we have gotten so much smarter about training, and we have gotten so much smarter about recovery, and these athletes taking months, if not years off after an Olympic Games to reset and not burn out. Whether or not their body can physically handle it is one thing, but if they're miserable while they're doing it, like, and Adam Peaty is somebody who's talked very candidly about, when he's fully training for the Olympics, at least for the last Olympics, that he was like the most miserable he's ever been.
Yeah.
And I think taking that time to recalibrate, I think we are much more accepting of that and much more willing, our athletes are much more willing to do it in the first place.
Yeah. Well, I mean, two of the examples that I gave, Simone Biles and Tom Daley, both, they basically left the sport completely, right? They didn't compete. They weren't training. They just, and just like Simone Biles went and got married and just, Tom Daley did the same thing, got married, had kids, and almost kind of left the sport completely, but weren't afraid to do that. And then it was kind of like, should I go back? Yeah, why not? I actually quite enjoy this stuff. So I think there's definitely something there about taking those breaks. But, like you said, Leah, just not being afraid to do that, not being afraid to prioritize recovery, and prioritize rest. And that's kind of physical as well as mental recovery from training so hard for so long.
100%.
What else? What else happened then? So Sifan Hassan, bronze in the 5,000, 10,000, gold in the marathon, all in 6 days. And two of them were like the day after. Was it 10,000 the day after the 5,000?
Yeah. 24 hours, and then like five days later, she runs a fucking marathon. Like,
yeah. I mean, talk to me about that.
Just the crazy thing about the marathon, I mean, first of all, what? I don't know. But like,
I'm taking it from that you've never run a marathon.
I would rather lay down in traffic.
Okay, Quincy. Quincy, you ever run a marathon?
I ran one marathon. That's it. I run one.
Yeah.
I couldn't walk for about a week and a half afterwards. So I can't even comprehend how running that much and then running a marathon is something that is even something that's it's physically
Yeah.
possible
Yeah.
for a human
Like,
being.
I'm gonna run a 5K, do a 10K recovery run, and then run a
Right.
Yeah,
And
no,
win it.
no way.
and win it.
It is no way.
And in the marathon, set an Olympic record, also BT dubs. But like her final, like, I don't know if it was like half a mile. It was pretty far out that she started to really push and had like the most unbelievable kick at the end, and to like overtake runner after runner after runner to finish first was like one of the most impressive feats of athleticism I've ever seen.
So, you know, athleticism aside, because obviously she's a fantastic athlete, right? But,
Right.
you know, mentally, you know, psychologically, like, how do you make yourself do that, right? Obviously, her running a marathon the day after a 10K is different to me running a marathon the day after a 10K, right?
Right.
But you know, mentally, how do you get up for that? How do you make yourself do that? And like you say at the end, like, how have you, you know, where do you go to in your mind in order to be able to like push and push and push, you know, right in that last sort of half an hour?
I mean, to me, part of it is like, because I work with a lot of distance runners, is like not expecting it to be anything other than it is, right? Like, you have to just go in with a really realistic understanding of like, this is going to be uncomfortable, however you define that, right? And to not pretend like I'm going to be fine, right? When you're standing on the starting line, knowing that you've already run 2 races. And I think having that acceptance up front and just like, it's not great, but like here's how I'm going to manage it.
So knowing that you have the physical capabilities of doing it, but also acknowledging that like this is going to be awful, but I know that I can physically at least do it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of like, you know, appraisal of like, what do I have to lean on, right? I have my training to lean on. I prepared everything that I'm going to do for this moment. Like, I knew this was the plan going into the Olympics. It's not like she accidentally ran the marathon, you know, like she, like, knowing that like this is what it's going to be, and to be able to just kind of like leave the other 2 races, be like, those are done, can't do anything about them, move on to the next race, and just whatever's next in front of you is the thing that you're going to deal with. And to recognize that, like, what is my capacity for being uncomfortable in these moments?
Quincy, what are you saying to yourself as an athlete? You know, what would you, or how would you help an athlete work on some of that self-talk? Right, you an hour and a half into a marathon, like it's horrible, it hurts. Like, how are you dealing with that? What are you saying to yourself? How are you getting yourself through?
Yeah. First of all, do you even feel your legs at this point? Like, you don't even feel your legs at this point. So you're just gliding. Like, as long as my arms are moving, I know I'm in motion. That's the only reason why I know I'm in motion.
Like, fully dissociated.
Right. Everything. It's just everything's numb. Right.
Yeah.
But I feel like, again, just kind of, and you see this a lot, like, even if you do just work out in general, like how Leah was just talking about that kick the last like half mile to a mile. Like, I feel like sometimes it's easy for us to find this boost of adrenaline when we know we're closer to the end, right? When we know we're that much closer. So you see this in athletes a lot where, like, or even if you work out yourself, when you get to like that last set, right? And you're like, this is my last one, so I know I can go all out. I don't have anything after this, right? And you get in that mindset where you can kind of just make a shift. It might have sucked the entire time, but you shift to this mindset where I don't have anything else. I can give everything that I have right now, because afterwards I'm done. And so I feel like that might be, you know, something. I think that's a place where these athletes they shift that mindset to that space, because they know, like, what's the worst that can happen, right? I'm probably going to pass out at the finish line regardless, because I just ran all these different races. I might as well give it all I have and go for the goal.
I'd be like, I'm going to eat every croissant in the like 5 mile radius.
Yeah, right. Yep. Get the plates ready. I need everything right now. and make sure the wheelchair is there so you can just wheel me off. But I think even just like the athletes that I work with now, like again, I try to build a lot upon their strengths and try to
Mm.
find words and different phrases and things that matter to them and hold value. And so if they're ever in a predicament where they feel like they can't go anymore, okay, well, what can we lean on to help you push to that next gear, right? Because like Leah was saying, we know it's going to suck. It's not going to be easy. And so for me to sit here and tell you to be like, oh, I'm at the starting line, I'm gonna be okay. I'm about to run 5,000 meters. I'm gonna be just fine. Like,
Mm.
it's gonna hurt, right? Like the lactic is gonna start to kick in, and your legs are gonna burn. But okay, what can we lean on, right? What can we go to in the moment to shift your mindset so you're not thinking about how much it hurts, and you're more finished about thinking about the drive, right? To push through, finish strong. And I think that's what a lot of these athletes are doing. Like, you got to practice it first. You can't just go out to the meet and try to do it right then and there, right? And
Mm.
that's what I'm trying to tell our athletes that I work with is like, in order for you to have this work during performance, you have to practice it, right? So if we're talking about our strength based words, and we're talking about the phrases that we want to say to ourselves during difficult times, we have to do it in practice.
There's a really great book called What I Talk About When I Talk About Running by Murakami. And one of the things that I use, and I've probably said this before, but I use it with a lot of my athletes, is he says that, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. That it's going to be painful. And
Mm-hmm.
and you see this also with like these distance cyclists who do like these stage races. They live for that uncomfortable moment. They live for being in that level of pain that's where they know that they're doing the work, right? Like you were saying, Quincy, of like, how can I like find that moment and not necessarily pretend like it's not happening, not necessarily fight the discomfort, but like leaning into it and knowing that you can get through it and that you have that level of resiliency, that it's not going to kill you, that you've done all the training, you've done all the work, you've done this before. And that's the thing that you can rely on in the end.
One of the other things I wanted to talk about briefly was the kids. Basically, the amount of young kids. We've already talked about Quincy Wilson, or we mentioned him briefly at the start. Quincy Wilson, 16-year-old competing in the 4x400.
I know he literally tweeted out the other day. He's like, "I can't believe I have to go to school in 2 weeks."
Yeah, and a couple of other examples of like really young, and like, I think especially with some of the sports that are included now. So like obviously skateboarding, BMX, you see a lot of kind of the athletes who compete are really young. Again, talk to me a little bit about that. How might you approach that as a psychologist working with a younger athlete? What kind of things might they be dealing with that might be different to somebody who's, we talked about longevity before. LeBron James has been there. Simone Biles has been there. Like how might we work with like a real young kid who's on this global stage all of a sudden, and like you say, has to go to school in a couple of weeks?
I mean, I think for me, when I work with a younger athlete, and again, like I haven't worked with a ton. My youngest client ever was 9. She was a diver. But I worked with like a lot of high school athletes. And I think for me, my emphasis, one is like enjoyment, right? Having fun with the sport. And 2, self-worth and separating out from your accomplishments. And that however you end up and whatever place result is separate and apart from who you are as a valued human being.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking at I'm going at it about the same way. I would definitely challenging them to just embrace the moment, right? And even hyping them up in that moment of how many kids your age are going to compete at the Olympics, right? Building that confidence, I think, is huge. But I also think, again, not placing your worth or your value on the success of what you have to do, right? Or what the results are for them. And so looking at it from a perspective of, what goals might you have going into it that have nothing to do with any type of medal, any type of success? Like, what other goals do you have for yourself? And then kind of from there, saying, well, what can you get better at when you come back? Or just looking at it from a different perspective. I think Quincy Wilson, he was in a situation I thought was awesome because I watched the post-race interview where like all those grown men rallied around him. Everybody was positive, hyping him up. Like, I think that right there in itself is going to help him as he progresses throughout his career. Because it could have been the complete opposite, and they could have all, rolled their eyes and been like, well, this 16-year-old doesn't know what he's doing. Like, and you get the other side of things that could have been the result. And so for him, it was just awesome to see how he might not have been okay with his performance or thought he could have performed better, but they were really picking him up and saying, you did great. Like, you were awesome for us. We really enjoyed having you out there. These different things that I think can do wonders for a kid's confidence. That could be all the difference in, a kid 8 years from now who doesn't want to compete anymore because he doesn't enjoy the sport. And so I think that having teammates and having those around you who support you is also very, very huge.
And it comes back to what we were saying earlier about those experienced athletes who are much more openly talking about and demonstrating the fact that they're really enjoying what they're doing, and it's not all about that gold medal success. Like having those types of role models throughout and across all different sports, and kind of being really vocal about that, I guess is really important for some of those young kids coming through.
And I think also just to like recognize, like you said, Quincy, to like embrace the moment, enjoy it for what it is, but also recognize that like it's not your whole life. Like you still have so much after this. You had so much before this. You have to go back to school. Yeah. Like you got to go to biology. Sorry.
Right.
But like this one moment doesn't define you. Like however you performed it's one day among many, and they're going to have many, many more moments in this sport.
Leah, just before we go to a quick break, did you want to talk about like leadership? I know you had a couple of examples there of maybe failures in leadership.
Yeah. So I kept thinking about, as I was watching the Olympics, of just like, there were several really distinct moments where I felt like athletes were just really let down by the leadership in their sport. Primarily the Canadian women's soccer team, who, if you weren't familiar, had a huge scandal at the beginning of the Olympics in which it was revealed that the coaching staff and the administrative staff had been spying on other soccer teams using drones. And their head coach got sent home from the Olympics. And
I didn't know any of this.
And
I didn't know that either.
They had an assistant coach had to leave, and apparently got to the point where like emails were coming out that this had been going on for years. And all the Americans were like, yeah, everybody knew this was happening. Like, this has been going on forever. They accuse us of doing this all the time when it's clearly them. Like, this was like a pretty well-known thing, but apparently at this point they got caught, and there was a ton of like legitimate emails of like the head coach being like, I told this person to go use a drone on this team and they refuse, and they're not being a part of the team, and I'm gonna like threatening people's jobs for not complying with it. Like really bad.
Wow.
And FIFA gave them a 6-point penalty out of the round robin. So they literally had to win every single match just to get out of the round robin to the knockout stage, which they did, and then they promptly lost. But your leadership set you up to fail, right? Yeah. On the biggest stage, or you see like a Nigerian athlete, a track athlete, was unable to compete in an event because her organization forgot to sign her up for it.
I saw that one, yeah.
Like just didn't add her name to the list. And she's like, I hope I can compete in my other events, and you look at the Nigerian women's basketball team who have been mistreated by their delegation, like just telling them the wrong places. They didn't get to participate in the opening event because, again, their delegation forgot to add them to the boat. So they weren't allowed on the boat. And then they couldn't get out of Paris to go back to the city where they were supposed to. So they ended up missing their first practice. And like just all of these things, and then they actually won their very first basketball game ever in the Olympics, upsetting Australia of all people. But like these women, generally speaking, just these unnecessary roadblocks and these unnecessary stressors, and just really taking away from their accomplishments and really taking away from their ability to perform at the highest level. And it's just so frustrating to watch systems fail athletes over and over and over again. Another example was the United States men's 4x100 sprint, that because Noah Lyles had dropped out, instead of just replacing his anchor leg with a new person, they reordered the whole relay.
Yeah, that went horribly wrong.
It was like the first
disaster.
Yeah.
Like truly.
I mean, I'm not going to complain because Great Britain won a medal, so we benefited from that.
Sure. You're welcome.
Thanks.
But again, like, what are these athletes supposed to do?
Yeah.
Right? Like when your coaches fail you, your administration fails you, your sport organization fails you. And it's like, I kept seeing this theme like come up over and over and over again through these Olympics. And my heart goes out to these athletes, and these athletes are doing the best they can, truly. But I will say, on a positive note, Emma Hayes, as the soccer coach for the United States women, the more I see interviews from her talking about leadership, I would run through a brick wall for this woman. Like, it's just the amount she came on board 2 months ago. And we had a disastrous World Cup for the women. And to come around and like all of a sudden win a gold medal at the Olympics was just like incredible. And her focus on athlete welfare. And she even said, the way the tournament is set up is not conducive for athletes to succeed. They just get fatigued, they get injured. But just talking about how using the staff that she brought on and relying on the experts in their field had been so valuable. And relying on Lindsey Horan, the captain, and sort of like letting people do their jobs and knowing that that's how she was going to be successful and that's how she was going to get this team to be successful, I think was really refreshing to hear.
So I guess, Quincy, that kind of, the stuff that Leah's been talking about there just speaks to the importance of the team surrounding the athlete. We look at the athlete out there by themselves competing, but actually there's a whole system around the athlete that's kind of just as important, right?
Right. I think from a systemic standpoint, when you're looking at it, like, again, we only, like, a lot of these things I didn't even know about, Leah, so thanks for kind of shedding light on them. Because you only hear the stories, but you don't know what the root of the problem, right? And again, like, that's all everybody ever goes off of is what the media is delivering to us, right? And so if we hear that
they're reigning gold medalists, they should have been an easy peasy shoo-in, right?
Right. And then like all the blame always falls back on the athlete, right? And none of the organization, especially if they're at fault for it, they're never going to take the blame, right? So they might ride with you the whole way. If you're winning gold, they're with you, they're in support of you. But as soon as something falls through the cracks or something bad happens, then, it's, front page, here's the athlete's name. They did it. They're at fault for it. And that is all that we get as well, right? And I think we see this across, especially as athletes get from like that high school to college and now at their professional ranks, but even more at the collegiate, right? Like these are just, and people don't understand, these are just kids. And a lot of blame is being placed on them for stuff that is way out of their control, right? They're just, hey, I'm just playing the sport that I'm really good at. I'm fortunate to get a scholarship for. And now you're getting death threats and you're getting hate mail and you're getting social media DMs and you're getting all these different things that are being thrown at them. when they are just trying to go out there and have fun, right? And so that's when you see a lot of issues that, mental illness starts to come up. You see a lot of other different things that start to arise because the organization is, failing athletes, or athletes aren't being taught the right skills or the right techniques to be able to manage a lot of these things that are taking place. So that's something that I, very fortunate about our athletic department, our organization here, is that we try to prepare the athletes for anything and everything that might come their way, and do it from a systemic process. For everybody that has touch points with the athletes on a daily basis to make sure that well-being and everything is intact for them, because again, you're not just an athlete, like you are a person as well. And so building that athletic identity so that they understand their own personal value is very essential.
This is the 80% Mental podcast, and I'm here with Dr. Leah Washington and Dr. Quincy Davis, and we are talking about the Olympics, our EPM Special Olympics review, talking about Paris 2024. We've just talked about kind of some of the maybe issues that cropped up through leadership, some of the maybe leadership failures that had a kind of negative impact on some of the athletes. Let's kind of bring it back to something a little bit more positive. Let's talk about our favorite moments, things that just stood out, things that we just enjoyed watching. Leah, go. What was kind of some of your favorite moments from the Olympics?
I mean, we got to talk about men's pommel horse, right?
Do we?
Gymnastics, 100%. Oh my gosh. So for those of you who are unaware of Steven Nedorosek, who was the pommel horse king for the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what people don't necessarily understand about the pommel horse in men's gymnastics is every single person on earth hates it. They hate it. They don't want to do it, except for like 3 guys who specialize in it, and they love it, and it's all they do. Now, obviously, like I watch a lot of college athletics, and I watch a lot of college gymnastics, and Steven Nedorosek comes out of Penn State gymnastics. And so I've been following his career for a number of years, and I'm so happy that everyone has gotten the Steven Nedorosek memo that like, we need to pay attention to this guy because he's incredible. He's such an amazing pommel horse competitor. He's so good at it. He has won a world title on it. And it's all he does. And I said to my partner, Tim, when I was watching the Olympic trials, I was like, if he gets picked for this team, he's going to do nothing else. He doesn't compete on any other events. It's the only thing he does. And he was like the last competitor on the last event. I mean, he'd been in the arena for hours, just chilling, and goes up, and his performance put the United States on the podium. And we won a bronze medal because of it. And there are lots of like videos of him doing his imagery.
I was going to say, yeah, I've seen some of those,
which were really great. Like him in sort of like his Zen mode, and he's got his little glasses on because he's a huge dork, and like he's an engineering major. He solves Rubik's cubes. Like I love him with my whole entire heart. I'm just so happy that he's finally getting the recognition for his success, and was able to come up in like such a clutch moment.
Awesome. Quincy, what about you? Favorite moments, things that you saw that stood out to you?
I mean, I think I'm always gonna lean on the Quincy Wilson thing. As I'm sitting there watching, I was like, I tapped my wife. I'm like, do you think he has to go back and run against high school track? Like, how easy is it for him to just go back and just like jog when he's just running against grown men? Like, I was just in such awe. Like, you should just see me watching this kid run. So impressed with him. I also thought I was worried. I'm a huge basketball guy, so I was worried that the U.S. men's basketball team was not going to make it. Thankful for Steph Curry and him showing up. I think that was huge, right?
Yeah.
For him. But I think one of the greatest things that I really enjoyed about this team, because basketball can be a very ego-based sport, especially when you get around like NBA players and people talking about the NBA. But one of my favorite moments was just the way that Jason Tatum handled himself. And just again embrace the moment and everything that it was, right?
Yeah.
He was catching a lot of slander for, hey, you just won an NBA championship and you can't even get, minutes in this game, in these Olympic games. And I think that in itself can really not only tear somebody down, but ruin team chemistry in the way that he might have interacted with his teammates. But from what I was able to see, it didn't seem apparent. When he got his gold medal, he was happy as could be. And I think just really taking in the moment, embracing the moment, and also understanding, like, dude, you're what, 23, 24 years old? Like, you're going to be back at the Olympics again, right? This is probably LeBron's last Olympics. This is, Kevin Durant. He could come back, but will he? Who knows? So a lot of these young guys who were just able to, again, sit back, and even though they have larger roles in the U.S. and on their respective teams, they didn't really get too caught up in their own egos and what they accomplished over here. They just kind of went over there and did it all for, the U.S. and that team and the team goal of wanting to win a gold. So I think that was awesome. And then I was also really big on beach volleyball. And I'll tell you why I was big on beach volleyball. I was in Mexico for a wedding. I told you about this, right? And while I was there, I'm playing beach volleyball. I have no clue how these people can play beach volleyball.
It's so hard.
I don't know if you guys have seen those TikToks of, like, I just missed the Olympics, right? Like, that's what I envisioned myself, like, playing beach volleyball. And I'm just like, I don't know how they're able to, one, move so fast in the sand, jump as high as they can. Like, I've never felt any more non-athletic while I was watching beach volleyball as a former athlete, because I'm like, I couldn't do anything while I was out there. So I think overall, those three things were kind of like my favorite moments of the Olympics.
From that, like, Suni Lee posted her fall off of the balance beam in the individual finals, and she was like, unfortunately, I was chosen for the Olympics.
Yeah. Right. Yes, exactly. Something like that.
Like, way to have a sense of humor about yourself.
Well, one of the things, talking about the beach volleyball, one of the things that I saw was, I don't know if you guys saw this, when I can't even remember which countries were performing. It was a women's beach volleyball, and there was like a big argument, and it was kind of getting a little bit aggravated and a little bit heated. That. Yeah, and then the DJ, because I love the fact that they just got a DJ there, just playing
all
music.
All sports should have DJs.
Absolutely. But he put on Imagine with John Lennon, and they just kind of, which is cheesy as hell, right? And it's not a great song. I'll die on that hill, but it was cheesy as hell.
Overdone.
They kind of just just sort of like looked at each other and just sort of like smiled.
The crowd started singing.
Yeah. And they looked at each other, and this sort of, anger just sort of faded away, and they started smiling at each other and just sort of realizing that they were in this moment, like at the Olympics, playing this game. And as cheesy as it was just like a really nice moment to see, I think.
To like reset of like, what are you guys doing? Like, you're at the Olympics. Like, come on.
Right. Yeah.
But the other thing the other thing about the Olympics, kind of some of my favorite moments, things that stood out, was just like Noah Lyles. I mentioned it before, like everything I see about him, I like him a little bit more, but just the sort of just joy and exuberance and like unashamed ADHD-ness. Just kind of like coming out and jumping around all over the place.
He's like a hummingbird.
And I just like just being authentic. Like being authentically him and unashamedly him, the painted nails, like all of that stuff. And I loved it. I just loved seeing that. There were a couple of things that stood out to me.
I think one of my other ones was this woman, her name was Kinzing Lamo, and she was from Bhutan, and she finished last in the marathon, the women's marathon. And you could tell she was like really struggling. Like, it was hot that day. I mean, she finished like an hour and a half after everybody else, but she was like, you could tell she was like not having a good day. And she was kind of walking, and she was like sort of shuffling along, and spectators started to run alongside her, like along the route, like on the other side of the barriers. And like more and more people like started to like, were like cheering for her. Some guy showed up like randomly with a Bhutanese like flag and was like running behind her. And like most people would have just been like, fuck it, I'm I'm going to call it and just be done. And she just kept going, and she would like walk a little bit and like jog a little bit, and like more and more people like kept joining her and like cheering her on. And by the time she got to like the finish line, like everybody was like screaming for her. And it was just like such a moment of like celebration of sport and athletes, of like, you don't have to be the best, you just have to be here. And we're going to cheer for you anyway. And you're probably the only person from your country who is competing. And, you know, we're going to stay. We're not going to leave.
Awesome. I love it.
It was just such a like beautiful moment.
So Leah, there's something that I want to bring up before we kind of finish up the episode. And you mentioned to me sports that aren't sports but should be sports.
Oh yeah, so sports I want to see in the Olympics.
Tell me about sports that aren't sports that should be sports. Again, this is the kind of thing that I think should have its own little theme to you in this segment.
Well, because before we've talked about like if you could have any sport, and now, you know, like let's make up a sport.
Yeah.
So I kind of was like thinking along those lines, but some of them are like kind of serious. So we talked about like the tragedy that was breaking, and I was thinking about like what would be something that was like super cool that still had some cultural relevance, particularly for like the African American community. And I thought, instead of breakdancing, which I genuinely love, do I think it needs to be in the Olympics? I'm not totally sold on it. But what if we had double Dutch jump roping?
I could get behind that.
I think that would be cool as hell. You could have teams, you have your routines, you've got like super fit people doing incredible acrobatics. I would be all for a double Dutch competition.
Yeah, I could get behind that. I like that.
So that's one.
Okay, there's more?
Two.
I should have known.
Go big or go home. You know me. So I think one of the things that my partner and I were talking about is like sort of how they're bringing these more like combination events, or like they're having like mixed relays or whatever. And I was thinking about like the heptathlon and, you know, the decathlon and the pentathlon. I think it would be cool to have like a throwing group, like where you have, and you could do it similarly to like it's a point system or whatever. So you have your javelin, your discus, your shot put, and your hammer, and you have a combined score of just throwing. Because I don't think people pay enough attention to the throwing event.
They really don't. And I was guilty of this myself. Like I said to my wife when we were watching it, I was like, I kind of feel bad for the discus throwers because I don't care. I mean, and I feel harsh saying that. And if there's any discus throwers listening, I'm sorry, but I just don't.
But it's such a technical sport, and it's so hard to be good at it. Yeah. I think doing like a combined event would be super cool.
Okay. Yeah.
And along those lines, because I talked about like the triple jump, my thoughts on the triple jump are that it's really impressive. It's very difficult. It's very technical. And I think it's very stupid, and I hate it.
It's a bit silly.
It's based on hopscotch. That's problematic to me.
Okay.
So
is it though?
According to Encyclopedia Britannica, it is. I didn't make that up. But I think we should replace it, because we used to have the standing broad jump. Mm-hmm. I say we bring that back and again do a combined event: standing broad jump, standing vertical jump.
Okay.
So we've got.
I mean, the concept I understand. It's not a great spectacle.
That's true, and that's a valid argument against it. But if I could get rid of the triple jump, that I think is a point in its favor.
Oh, fair enough. Quincy, what have you got? What would you like to see in the Olympics that's not in the Olympics?
Oof.
Flag football's going to be in LA 28.
Flag football. I actually like the addition of flag football.
I think it's gonna be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really cool.
I'm undecided
on the flag football thing.
Yeah, I'm undecided. I like it. I don't know if I want to see it as an Olympic sport, but yeah. What else? What other things would you like to see that aren't there now?
Man, that's a tough one. That is tough, because I am like just like I find the sports that I really enjoy, and I kind of stick to those sports throughout the entire Olympics. So I'm really bad at thinking about like, oh, what else is going on right now?
Yeah.
But like I said, I got into like beach volleyball. I got into like diving, like things that I had never been really into before. I just all of a sudden gained interest this Olympics. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
What would you take out then? Because I mean, I like golf. Sorry, no. That's out.
Not a golfer. Okay.
No.
Again, not much of a spectacle.
No.
I got one more because I was thinking about the summer versus winter Olympics and how like the winter Olympics, like definitely the summer is more like faster, higher, stronger. And then like the winter Olympics are very much like the risk of death and destruction is that much greater. So I was thinking about like the bobsleigh and like, what if we had water slide equivalent?
Stop it.
You're telling me you wouldn't watch that? You wouldn't watch a water slide? Come on.
Okay. Theoretically,
we watch the bobsleigh, we watch a skeleton, we watch a luge. You're telling me you wouldn't watch
okay, so I have questions. Because when you said what
don't know if I can answer them, but go ahead.
Because immediately in my head, I thought you meant like, when you go down the water slide and jump and then like, land in the water. Sure. So that's what I thought you meant. But then I thought, oh no, you mean like a water slide for time?
Yeah. No, I think that'd be great.
Okay. I mean, I could probably get behind the idea of, the water slide, jump, do some flips, tricks in the air, and then land in the water with a dive.
I mean, sure.
It wouldn't be bad. It probably wouldn't be bad.
Yeah. I mean, it would be a bit
you're
silly,
saying we should get rid of the bobsleigh and the luge and the skeleton and the Winter Olympics.
Oh, no, I like them. I think we should keep them. We'll talk about that in 2 years.
I'm just saying we could have an equivalent.
This is the 80% Mental Podcast. I'm here with Dr. Quincy Davis and Dr. Leah Washington. We've just summarized the Olympics in our special Olympic review of Paris 2012. Before we finish, well, actually, two things that I want to do. First of all, massive shout out to Ami Barrow, who is the daughter of Dr. Mona Arvinen Barrow, psychologist, specializes in injury. And Ami was the first female swimmer to represent the Gambia in the Olympics. So huge shout out to both Mona Arvinen Barrow and Ami Barrow, her daughter.
That's cool.
What is a huge accomplishment.
That's really awesome.
Yeah. Well, the second thing I wanted to do before we finish is to talk about the closing ceremony, because
incredible.
I have questions. I have
no questions.
I have lots. No, I have a few. The actual ceremony bit itself was cool. And then Tom Cruise showed up for some reason. Did you see this, Quincy?
I saw a piece of it. And I didn't understand that they just like, they had somebody who was supposed to be there and just like, hey, Tom Cruise, you're here. Let's just throw you in. Yeah, like, that's kind of what it seemed like. Like it just seemed a little random.
Yeah.
He's a huge movie star. We're about to have the Hollywood Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he's going to jump off a stadium. I thought that was very clear.
Yeah. I mean, oh, no, it's very clear in that I saw it happen with my eyes. But yeah, it all went a bit strange after that. But what I love though, and we haven't talked about this yet, is Snoop, who basically just was at the Olympics just having the absolute time of his life.
Vibes.
He's like undergone this weird transformation from like slightly dubious character to the lovable grandpa. Like,
him dancing with the horse was maybe just such a chef's kiss moment. He's like standing in front of the horse and he's just like getting his little groove on. The horse is like, sure.
But I loved it, like his interaction with Simone Biles and Jordan Childs, who's watching some of the gymnastics.
They're like, hey.
Yeah, and then he was having a go at fencing, and like, how has this happened? How has this happened that he's gone from, again, somewhat questionable human being to just this like lovable figure
like
of
mascot
fun
of the Olympics.
Yeah, I love it.
I actually also want to just shout out to Flavor Flav for sponsoring men's and women's water polo for the next 5 years. That he signed a deal for them, and I'm like, hell yeah, 5 years. And like, this is what your money is for. Like, find a random sport and fucking sponsor it. Like, what are all you rich people doing? Like,
love it.
Men's field hockey in the United States could probably use some support. Like,
yeah. Did you see what else Flavor Flav's done?
The bronze clock.
Yeah. So we haven't talked about Jordan Chiles, who's again, just let black women be good at things, right? So she's had a bronze medal stripped from her, and Flavor Flav has given her a bronze clock.
It's so good.
Which is amazing.
It's amazing.
I love it. So yeah, oddly, and 20 years ago, I didn't think I'd be saying on an Olympics podcast, shout out to Snoop Dogg and Flavor Flav.
Right.
Who'd have thought?
Saviors of the Olympics.
Yeah.
There you go. No, he's definitely going to be carrying the torch, running through LA.
Absolutely.
So that'll be Snoop all the way, just running through every part of LA.
Well, we will no doubt be back in 4 years' time. Will the podcast still be going in 4 years' time? I don't know, but if it is, we will definitely do a review of LA 2028. Quincy, Leah, it's been an absolute blast. I've loved doing this. We're going to have to do this every time there's an Olympics. Winter Olympics in 2 years. Quincy, will you join us again for that one?
Am I locked in?
Oh, you're locked in now, yeah.
I'm there.
Chelsea, you're out.
Yeah,
Quincy,
Chelsea,
I'm locked in. I'm there. I'll call me off the bench. I'm in. There we go.
We got the Paralympics coming up.
Paralympics in a couple of weeks as well. Yeah.
Oh, so excited.
And we will do a Paralympics review as well this year. But for today, it just remains for me to thank the two of you, Leah, as always, co-host.
My pleasure as always, Betsy.
And Dr. Quincy Davis, thank you so much for giving up some of your time to come and talk about the Olympics. I really enjoyed having you on the podcast. It's been great.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, I hope you guys out there in listener land have enjoyed our EPM Special Olympics review of Paris 2024. Like I say, we'll be back. We'll do a Paralympics review in a couple of weeks as well, so keep an eye out for that. And then we'll get on with the rest of the series, which has been awesome so far, even though we're only 2 episodes in. Normally this Olympic review falls a little bit later on in the series, but we'll kind of get it in there early. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next time, although I won't see you because it's a podcast.